Hello, a very good evening, Yasha family, and welcome to this second edition of the Enlight Table Talk. Once again, we are so glad that you could join us from wherever you are joining us from. It's great to know that you are still logged on to these great conversations that we started last week, and we continue to build on them. Last week, we had a very great discussion on young people and leadership. And I'll tell you some of the things that we discussed there. But I'm very excited that today we have another great panel that will be able to build up that conversation from where we started yesterday. But like we always do, remember, these are great conversations that we do not want anybody else to miss. So do us a favor, do someone a favor by just reaching out, tag somebody, share the platform from wherever you're watching us from, and let any person that you care about and know needs to listen to this conversation log in and be part of this conversation. They can either join through the Zoom link or they can be on the Facebook Live and be part of these discussions. I'll be your host. My name is Benjamin Mwape, and I'm very excited that today we have a great team of minds and leaders who have demonstrated some of the principles of leadership that we are using here at Yasha to inspire young people to lead, inspire, and thrive. And so we'll be going into the discussions, but let me remind you, last week we had a great team of friends that came to discuss the subject of young people and leadership. And we looked at why young people going in the forefront of leadership is important, and some of the critical or some of the essential needs that require young people to be able to go to the forefront of development of leadership in their various perspectives. But also we looked at some of the barriers that are hindering young people from rising into leadership spaces and how those can be dealt with. More importantly, we did look at the enablers or the capacity building points of leadership for young people. What can young people practically do to ensure that they build their leadership capacity and are able to thrive in their various spaces, in their various sectors to lead? One of the things that came out very common in the discussions last week was the realization to the fact that while we have a lot of young people driving leadership or driving change at various levels of institutions, we notice that they don't actually own the ultimate power. So one of the examples that was given, for example, is you have a lot of young people now at managerial level, management level in the private sector. And one critical example is in the banking sector, for example, where we have now a great number of young people that are driving change at management level. But unfortunately, these young people get stuck at that level of just driving this development process or driving this change, but they're not necessarily the holders of the ultimate power. And the challenge from last week's discussion was the need for us as young people to then begin to rise into becoming ultimate holders of power, and ensuring that when we talk about young people and leadership, it is not just at that mid-level, but ensuring that young people are beginning to rise into the ultimate spaces where the critical decisions are made, where the ultimate power is held. So today we are building up from last week's conversation, and we'll be looking at young people taking leadership in their communities, young people taking leadership in their communities. And this discussion is in the context of civic participation. So how do young people now begin to make leadership practical? And this is what Yasha Enlight Table Talks is really focusing on, to ensure that the discussions that we have here do not just end up as discussions or talking points, but essentially that we are giving practical information, practical insights that young people can use to be able to go and make change, to be able to go and influence the various spaces that they are supposed to be leading. And so I'm very excited to be joined this evening by a great panel that will be helping us lead this discussion, and I'm going to bring them on board and introduce them. We'll talk a little bit about their personal journeys, and I'll tell you they have very exciting narratives to share about where they're coming from, what their personal stories are in terms of leadership, and then we'll be going into discussions around the critical areas that will enable you to become a real or demonstrable leader as a young person in terms of demonstrating leadership at various levels where you are. So I want to welcome a very special guest joining us this evening, who is the Executive Director for the Center for Trade Policy and Development, the Executive Director, Mr. Isaac Maipopo. Isaac, good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening, Mr. Benjamin, and welcome to those that are joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much that you could join us. As we always do, we also then have a dynamic leader in a young lady who is Rebecca Makwele, who is a child rights activist and youth advocate. And she's doing some fantastic work that we'll be going into some discussions on in details later on. But Rebecca, welcome and good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here.
All the way from Cape Town, South Africa, we are joined by Bila, who is a political analyst and youth activist. And we're so excited that you could join us this evening. And we know that you bring quite an interesting perspective and insight into this discussion. Bila, good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening and welcome to you and to my fellow panelists. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So welcome to all our guests. And what we will do is then allow our panel today to just give us a bit of their story, a bit of their journey in leadership. And after that, we'll go into the details of the discussion. I want to start with Rebecca. You have such an interesting story of very interesting, great work that you're doing, a lot of impact that you're creating around issues of child rights and just youth activism, as it were, in general. Would you like to just talk us a little bit more about how that started, what your journey of leadership has been, and what is inspiring you to do what you're doing at the moment? Over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. Good evening to everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I'm always interested to talk about my journey and how this passion has grown from one level to the other because of so many encounters that I've had personally with the victims and also with just people that are also interested in making sure Zambia is safe. So to start with, I am a lawyer by profession, and I'm a child's rights activist, like you said it, and I'm a youth activist as well. So I'm somebody who's very passionate about seeing a Zambia that is very safe in relation to sexual issues, such as, especially my passion is GBV, sexual gender-based violence, and that includes early child marriages, spousal battery. I talk about so many things that just don't make Zambia as peaceful as it should be. So for me, the journey started when I was young. I've always had this heart of trying to be a protector of somebody, try to speak on behalf of somebody who cannot speak out. So being a youth, I felt it is not enough to just talk about these things on TV. We really need to get to the roots of it. So my involvement has been on the grassroots itself, involvement with the community. So I have a team that we work hand in hand with. It's called Community Human Rights and Health Watch. It's a watch group in Mutendere. That's where most of these issues basically found. So my journey started from there, but from now to whenever I see myself going beyond just the borders of Zambia, but I see myself as somebody who would actually speak out and make sure from society, because I believe a child's upbringing is the most important thing. So if we're going to build leaders of tomorrow, it starts from here. So if you have an abused child, we have a broken nation, we have a broken family, then a broken government. So now I'm looking at taking care of that little child to make sure that tomorrow we raise the right leader, a leader that will come in is able to stand, not because of any brokenness. So now I'm looking at raising a generation that is safe from sexual abuse, safe from exploitation, safe from negligence, so that when they grow up, because childhood experiences build a youth, they build who they are in future. So I'm trying to preserve a generation that is able to stand. And because brokenness has to be taken away, I believe we're going to make a better Zambia if the young people are healed from the time they are being born to where they are. So it's all about just making sure Zambia is safe for everybody. Thank you, Benjamin.
I think our host may have dropped connection. I think he's back now, but I'll take the opportunity to also speak about myself until
Right.
he comes back. So again, same as you, Rebecca, I get very excited when I get these opportunities to speak about a very close cause to my heart, which is anything to do with youth and anything to do with my generation. As you may well know, when we speak about youth, we basically directly and indirectly assuming something about the future, which is the premise of most of our activism. We have something, we look forward to something in the future. And hence, this is where my background intertwines with this youth participation. It's basically, I am a professional, I'm a political consultant and analyst, but my whole life I've spent in causes very close to activism and youth leadership. I've been a civil rights campaigner from a very young age, campaigning issues such as human rights and social justice, almost on anything I could get my hands on. And when growing up as an expat in South Africa, I've also got to witness what influence the youth has in the South African Revolution and South Africa's struggle to freedom from apartheid. The youth had a major participation in that role. So these were all the influences that pushed me towards the way of trying to carry this cause of freedom and justice, not just to a place that I have direct links to, but to other places that struggle from or suffer from injustices or lack of freedoms. So I've been a proud supporter and member of the January 25 revolution and Arab Spring in Egypt. And ever since, I've been advocating similar causes and advocating the Egyptian cause around the world. And I am happy and proud to be joined by esteemed youth leaders like yourself, Rebecca and Isaac. And I hope that we give the audience food for thought and useful ideas for them and for us as well to be leaders and to be active members of society. Thank you. Isaac, I think you can go ahead.
Thank you. And nice to meet you, Rebecca. And nice to hear also from some of your experiences in terms of the work that you have been doing. So in terms of my work, I lead a local economic think tank that works to promote the use of trade and investment as tools for poverty alleviation and human development. Basically, our primary target policy makers. We work very closely with key government ministries like the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry, the Ministry of Health, and we work towards advancing suggestions in terms of alternative policies that they can consider to improve the welfare of the Zambian people. We also work very closely with a number of civil society organizations in advancing the cause for social justice. And in terms of my journey, it didn't actually begin within the civil society organization mainstream I am in currently. It all started with an organization called Restless Development. Back then it was called Students Partnership Worldwide. So I had volunteered to go and work in the rural parts of our country, where my job was basically to provide information to young people focusing on sexual reproductive health rights. And thereafter I had an opportunity to also do some voluntary work at a college where we were specialized in helping the teachers that were being trained on non-formal methods through which they can deliver sexual reproductive rights messages. Thereafter, I think I continued with this kind of work when I was studying at the University of Zambia. I found a lot of interest in organizing platforms and mobilizing students so that they can be part of a conversation that is contributing towards national development. So this saw me working around organizing public discussions, as well as joining campaigns that were related to issues around social and economic justice. And time and again, whilst I was studying for my bachelor's degree at the University of Zambia, I also found myself volunteering at a local radio station called Unza Radio, where I was basically providing political commentary on a daily show, which was airing every day in the morning. So we'd have different topics that were pertaining to the political and economic situation within the country. And it is from this background that I have continued to work in this environment where we continue to create spaces and environments where various people can get an opportunity to share their thoughts and be part of the process of ensuring that we develop a better country. And I'm happy to connect with fellow young people that are doing such kind of work in their own spheres. I think it helps to tell our story and further strengthen each other in line with some of the activities that are happening or some of the challenges that we tend to face in leading change. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm hoping one of the hosts will come up. I've noticed we have everyone is not here. Benjamin is not here. So let's give it a few minutes.
And perhaps while we wait for the host, it could be useful that we lay the framework for this discussion today. I think it's useful that we establish our background and so on. But do we have any? What's our future plans? Let's speak about that for a second. Maybe Rebecca, you can go first. What do you have planned for the future?
Okay, so for me, the future is bright. For me, future is about synergies. For me, future is about partnership. For me, future is about getting everybody on board. So if I talk about the future, I always talk about people. I mean, human power. We need everybody to be involved in trying to make Zambia safe, trying to make Zambia as available as we want it to be. You know, youths are out there. There's so much time that we try to create this notion that the leadership is for us youths. We try so much to say youths are the future leaders, but what we're forgetting is that is the society ready for these youths if they are actually capable enough to do what they are? So for me, I talk about the involvement at its biggest point. I'm talking about everybody just getting on board to make sure that this thing happens. I think for us to get to a point of having a responsible Zambia with responsible youths as leaders, it will take everyone's efforts. It will take a lot of synergies, everybody growing in and just getting to a point of just working together. I would shed more light with the people that I mainly work with. For me, I work so much with four important people. I would say four important people. I'm talking about victims of sexual abuse. I'm talking about the NPA, the people that prosecute. I'm talking about VSU, which is the police, and also the medical professionals. So for me, in order for us to have, for us to secure convictions in court in relation to abuse, sexual abuse, I believe in having all the four cadres work together for it to work, because the medical people are also saying the police are not doing a good job with investigations. We have NPA saying the VSU people are not doing thorough investigations, so the cases are not being brought in the way they should be. So for me, I believe in just growing the network, having everybody on board, having one goal. And if we're going to have a proper educative Zambia, a place where everybody can come in, even those that are abroad, to just come in and work and make society beneficial, it would take a lot of networking and just putting everything in place. There's a lot that needs to be worked on. The legal system is poor. We don't have, even the enforcers of the law themselves are not actually doing a good job. I believe there's a lot of work.
I think that's a great point to make there, Rebecca, especially when you mentioned about networking. Do you think perhaps that we as the youth have done enough in terms of sharing ideas across our different, causes, platforms, levels in, of profession, within the same, towns, within the same cities, even within the same continent? Do you think that us as youth have done what needs to be done to actually network and collaborate on efforts?
Okay. So I've noticed some questions. I don't know if we could read some of the questions that are already coming in as we wait. I don't know if that's okay with everybody. There are quite a lot. I think our moderator is having a challenge, but there are a lot of questions that have come on board. I don't know if we should just read that. Perhaps I could ask a question. Did you always want to do what you are doing now? So that's one of the questions that has come in. So in terms of people and collaboration, what does that mean from practical standpoint? What are we working towards today? What are those steps we can take today? You don't hear of many young people wanting to grow up plus be leaders in civic participation roles. It's laudable. I am interested to know how you ended up there. So those are some of the questions that are coming in, some of the contributions that are coming in. So people want to know, how did you get to where you are today? So Isaac, I think Isaac has been very quiet.
So in terms of how I ended up being where I am, I think it all started from a point of volunteering for a local NGO that was sending young people into the most rural parts of our country. You know, we are living in a country where we have a lot of young people that are graduating from universities with expectations that are exceeding what society is actually offering. So a number of young people actually leave colleges and universities with hopes to get jobs immediately, jobs that are paying. And most of us young people are actually not willing to even volunteer for some cause and learn one or two things, pick up on some skills that eventually you can bank on even as you look for a formal job. I've done a lot of voluntary work. At some point, I even volunteered for another organization where I was going into rural parts of the country, planting trees. These were fruit trees. I also volunteered for a radio station at the university when I was doing my studies. I volunteered for restless development. And my first job eventually came as a result of the voluntary work I was doing. So I used to also volunteer part of my time with a youth movement called Activista, which was being hosted by Action Aid. So when there was a vacancy at the Center for Trade Policy and Development, I was actually recommended for the role of a program officer. The recommendation actually came from Mr. Patrick Shindano, who now happens to be the Electoral Commission of Zambia CEO. By then, I used to volunteer to organize meetings for him. So working through as a program officer for about 2 years, there was an opening within the institution for the role of programs coordinator. I was elevated. A year later, there was a vacancy for the role of the executive director. So at that particular time, I think there were also a number of considerations. I was quite young in terms of age. I was basically 27 by then. And if you look at our society in terms of positions like those of being an executive director, predominantly you find people getting such positions when they reach the age of 40s and 50s, and sometimes there'll always be this notion that you can't entrust a young person to lead an institution of this kind. A lot of young people are irresponsible, so if you entrusted them with such a responsibility, they are actually likely to mess up. But fortune, like had it my way, I think the board of directors saw some potential and gave me an opportunity to act in the role of which I think I gave in my best, and I was eventually given an opportunity to assume the substantive role. In assuming the substantive role, I think it did not come easily. There were a lot of issues surrounding the rise. So one, there were issues to do with acceptance within the institution itself. There were some people that actually thought that someone that had been around just basically for about 2 years might not be in a position to lead the institution. It might lead to instability. So it became a bit difficult for me to receive the kind of support that I needed to fit into the role. But I had support also from some structures, especially from the board of directors that kept encouraging me to keep going until eventually I ended up setting up a team that would buy into my thoughts and plans for the institution. And with time, a number of things started falling into place. And along the way, I started gathering lessons which have proved to be quite worthwhile. Like one, you don't need to force yourself on people. You also need to allow time to also help you in terms of establishing yourself. And then the other thing is also the issue of performance. It has got a way of aligning people in terms of supporting you in terms of what you are doing. So in summary, I think that could be my journey to where I am today.
Awesome, fantastic. Isaac, thank you so much for sharing that interesting journey. And I want to say we're back. Interestingly, we're enjoying the rains where we are, and that means that we are trading internet connectivity for the rains that we're enjoying. But it's great that the team of leaders that we're hosting was able to take leadership and demonstrate leadership and continuing the conversation. So thank you so much to all three of you for doing that. And I was able to follow through bits and pieces of the conversation. But whilst we just listening to Isaac now talk about your struggle in terms of acceptance to take up that leadership opportunity that had arisen during that time, and some of the resistance that you faced, I want to shift the conversation and just be able to take perhaps Bilal and Rebecca, if you could share from your perspective, what are some of the barriers that are hindering young people from rising and taking leadership in their communities and being more proactively involved in various aspects of development and leadership in their communities? I'd like to start with you, Bilal, then I will go to Rebecca.
Sure, and welcome back then. I think, in my opinion, the biggest hindrance to youth taking leadership is the youth themselves. I think I say this with a caveat that in many cases, and of course the circumstances are different, but generally you'll find that the interest of youth lays in other areas rather than that of civic participation and or public leadership. We often rely on others to think about the future or to lead, and we think this is something that someone else can do. But in many cases, it's if the youth themselves are not prepared and willing to put their hands up, knowing that they have the capabilities, knowing they have the hunger to implement change in society and to take their communities forward, no one else is going to do it. And we also assume sometimes is that people in these positions know everything, and that the learning curve, they already well established and know so much about the positions, or know so much about what to do. And I tell you now, as a political analyst, as a person that has been doing this for many years, many people in these positions get there and they start learning, and they're in the deep end and they will start learning. So if you have the hunger, and if you have the ambition, and if you have the passion, then learning becomes the easy part. Learning about the position, learning about the role, that becomes the most important part. Your heart needs to be in the right place first. And I think also secondly, and this is where my caveat is that old people don't want to let go of their positions. Old people are a big hindrance to the people of the future. They, in many cases, they're entrenched those seats, thinking that they can sit there forever. And in many cases, they lead on with old ideas. They lead on, and again, not all people from the older generations are like this. There are many people with excellent thoughts. There are many people that have their hearts at the right place. I'm talking about the group of people, of elders, that think that the youth are not capable, and do not have mechanisms and processes to actually teach the youth, share knowledge, and prepare them for the future that the youth are going to live in, the next generation is going to live in. And again, it's not about also requesting from people that give us the space. We have to create those own spaces. So again, there's a big emphasis on agency here. The youth, there will always be, and I say this unremorsefully, there will always be a space where we can act, regardless of how difficult that society is. Take a society of Egypt, for example, where the cap of political and activism is extremely tight, and where people cannot have spaces, for example, to freedom of expression or even political participation. But it does not mean that every single space is closed. We have space, we have technology now, we have education that we can still access. We have the hearts and minds of people to win. So the main barrier to the success of people that have ambition in leadership is their own imagination and is their own creativity, and overcoming that first step of saying that I am responsible and I am creative and I have an idea for the future. That's where things will start, and that's where we can think about leadership strategically, and we can actually do something about it. I think we may have lost the host again. Rebecca, do you have any thoughts on what
I can come in and add.
Sorry, Isaac, of course. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I like the thoughts you have shared in terms of this whole change beginning with us as young people. I think there's another misconception that has hindered a lot of young people from making a positive contribution in the environments they live in. And this misconception has been around titles. So leadership is often associated with titles. It's associated with being an executive director. It's associated with aspiring for public office, let's say being an MP. And it's also associated with aspiring for public offices like maybe becoming a ward councillor. But leadership is none of the above. I think one of the things that everyone needs to realize is that within every given environment, you can actually demonstrate leadership and lead people to a desired end, provided that there is a cause that has been identified and there's need to turn around the situation. You can actually step in and begin to provide solutions. It's in the process of providing those solutions according to the needs of the society at that particular time that we begin to shape the narrative in terms of what really it means to lead, especially for young people. Then would take away their focus from chasing for titles, for chasing for positions. They'll begin thinking a lot more in terms of the change that they can bring to a particular environment. We might also need to move away from this narrative that we are the future leaders. I don't believe in that. I think the future that they often talk about is now. I think that future is a minute away. So we definitely need to take deliberate steps in changing our environment, changing the things that we are not happy about. Therein is a big opportunity for all of us to provide the much needed leadership. And it's a combination of some of those acts. When we add them together, then we build a compelling definition or a compelling understanding for people to understand in terms of what it means to lead.
Okay, so I guess Isaac is done, so probably I could come in now. So I would like to agree with both speakers that have actually alluded to the fact that most of the issues actually depend on us as youths. But I would like to talk about two main issues. For me, I want to talk about acceptance of the leadership system right now in Zambia. I think there's a lot of rejection when it comes to young people trying to rise up because of so many notions that the people feel we're not ready yet. So there's a bit of a barrier in trying to bring certain things into establishment because we are facing opposition even from people that are supposed to be giving us the go ahead, the people that are supposed to be giving us the support. So we are not really getting much support from the other end. So if we're going to have leaders in this country and they're young people, we need to have a system that will allow young people to also take part in some of these issues. Maybe because I'm in the legal sector, I would pay much attention to the legal system. I think there are a lot of things that really stop young people from being involved fully in most of the things that we have to do. So I think there's an issue of acceptance, just like Isaac mentioned earlier. It took time for people to accept his vision. It took time for people to accept who he is, because there's always this backwardness. There's so much that we need to revisit in our systems, in our policies, that will just allow everybody to just participate freely. I would go to legal side, for example. When we look at the penal code, when last was it revisited? Those are old acts that have been there. And these are some of the things that have been dwelling even in the systems when it comes to government and governance. There's a lot of things that have just stopped young people from putting in whatever effort they can because they're being frustrated in some areas. And I think we don't have much support in that regard. So that's just one of I just wanted to make a comment on that one to say there's isn't much acceptance and support. Even mentorship is not even there, because even when we give a practical example of the legal system, the lawyers, the law firms, you discover that, maybe because I have the experience of that, you discover that if senior counsel dies, the whole law firm dies. So there's a gap. There's a lot that's going on. We need to synchronize between the junior counsel to the senior counsel, so that there's continuity of work. Even if senior counsel passes on, there must be somebody to take over the mantle. So this system has been missing, even in the legal sector. You discover that most cases are still being prosecuted by the most recognized people. The young lawyers are still being young lawyers. They'll always be on test drive. The issue is there's a gap between the people that are experienced and the young people. So there's a lot of mentorship that has been lacking. I have always made mention of this. There's a gap. There's no acceptance. There's no mentorship that has been there. So young people are not given an opportunity, not because they are not experienced, but because there's somebody out there that does not feel they should give out the baton. So this is entirely going to affect us for years and generations to come, as long as no one is taking up the chance to just mentor somebody to get up that opportunity. So there's that gap, there's that acceptance issue that we need to deal with. Secondly, us, the youth ourselves, we are so dependent on other people. If there's nothing that involves money, we are not interested. We are not interested at all. So what we want is to always be in positions and to find a good car and a house, something that we can show off as young people. What we're forgetting is that we need to follow the process. And there's so much that young people have missed out on because of trying to get a bigger chunk before the opportunity comes. So look at Isaac. I love the fact that you brought out to say internship. Young people do not like to intern. They want to go and get a white collar job immediately after uni or college. They do not want to intern for free. I also interned for 6 months with WILDAF, Women in Law and Development in Africa, and I lost nothing. I got enough experience. And it's always important for young people to always know that they have to invest in something in order for them to get what they want. But this is what we fail to do as young people. We don't want to invest in our time, our effort. As long as there's no 100 kwacha at the end of the day, we're not willing to put our hands there. A good example is all lawyers. Every lawyer is a stereotype kind of a lawyer. I believe in stepping out. I came out and I said, I'm not going to be an ordinary lawyer. I'm going to be a lawyer that will bring in change. Nobody pays my handbills. I basically travel from one city to another, from one state to another, to make sure a child is protected. When there's an issue and somebody calls on me, I make sure somebody is brought behind bars, but not at anybody's peril. It's because the passion is in there. So the issue here is that young people are looking for the money, but before they look into the money, they're not looking at their passion. So they are misplaced. So we have so many young people that do not have the skill and the experience, not because they don't have the opportunity, but it's because they do not want to put in their hands. They want to just get the results, but it's not possible. There must be the process itself that you need to go through in order for you to get to where you want to be. So like I earlier alluded, I interned for 6 months. I have been working on pro bono basis and I have lost nothing. Instead, it has connected me and given me the experience I need. So first of all, we lack the passion. And because of that, we have lost direction. So youth have to be involved fully. And it takes you and me. We need to get to the basis of it. Put your passion right, go for it. Don't wait for that 100 kwacha, but just do what you need to do to make sure Zambia works for you. We're the only ones that are here. We need to make Zambia for ourselves. Yeah, I think that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca, and everybody, Lau and Isaac, for bringing those interesting perspectives. And I think they really consolidate this conversation in depth in terms of ability on both sides of the spectrum.
Okay, I think our host is having internet challenges.
On one hand,
I think our host is having internet challenges as he is trying to connect. I liked the comments that you were sharing.
Young people.
Okay, I think maybe another thing to add to the conversation as we are waiting for Benjamin to connect back is the reality that we also need to share with fellow young people in terms of the environment that we are living in. I've had experiences where we are looking for people to employ. We put out an advert which is not even placed in a newspaper. Within a week, we actually receive applications that are close to 1,000. And if you look at 1,000 applications, to me, it basically says a lot of our young people are actually training for jobs that are not existing out there. Like the environment is not growing at the rate at which it can absorb a lot of the young people that are being churned out from our various universities. And as a result, it means that we need to also begin a big conversation in trying to find solutions for these emerging challenges. And ourselves as young people have got a big role to change the narrative. It is very sad that on one hand, we continue to complain that the elderly people are not willing to move out of certain positions to pave way for young people. On the other hand, we ourselves as young people are not taking ourselves into those positions if we are given an opportunity, let's say through a ballot. There are few young people that rally behind a fellow young person and work towards ensuring that you put that young person into a particular position so that we begin to pull each other and to get into the strategic positions where we can make strategic decisions that also favor our interests, especially that when we look at the demographics, we still remain a huge a part of the population, such that if we're willing to support each other, even those that are aspiring for public office, we can deliberately scoop some of those positions and have a face that we can point to say, those are fellow young people, and we played a strategic role to get them to where they are.
Right. Belal, are you still here?
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we are.
Fantastic. I love the way the conversation is going, and thank you so much for holding fort whilst we continue to battle with the internet connectivity challenges. But I was saying earlier, I think that for me, one of the critical aspects was the recognition that the responsibility lies with both spectrums. The young people and the leaders currently that are holding power need to both play a role in providing and opening up the space for young people to rise in taking up greater leadership responsibilities, but also demonstrating their leadership capacity at various levels. I want to bring in the audience comments and just also allow the audience to be able to have their input before we wrap up. But I wanted to quickly just touch on the aspect of tokenism and ensure that we, when we talk about civic participation, we're not just talking about tokenistic engagement. So you will see that sometimes leaders that are holding power will recognize that we need to bring young people close, and they'll put up a platform just to demonstrate to the world that they're engaging young people. But all of that doesn't lead to anything. So how do we ensure that the participation of young people in leadership or in decision making is not tokenistic, but very meaningful and leads to something concrete? Because we've had a lot of young people things, but most of it has not led to substantive action or substantive opportunities for them to sustainably drive change and make critical decisions in as far as driving development in their communities is concerned. So how do we eliminate this challenge of tokenistic youth participation? I want to quickly go to Bilal and then we'll hear from the rest of you.
Thanks, Benjamin, and welcome back again. I hope your internet stays stable.
Hopefully.
So I think, and from my experience, is that one of the best countries that actually does this tokenistic participation and encapsulate it is actually Egypt. And we see many of these youth forums, and you may have seen international coverage around these youth forums held in 5-star hotels and resorts, where youth are sent invitation by name with security clearances, of course, as you know, to attend these youth conferences and basically make it a consensus party where people just say share happy thoughts and clap for each other in the end. And it's a sad sight, to be honest. And it's a sad sight to see youth actually taking part of this and helping those that host this type of events in showcasing and parading them to the world. It's a really sad sight. Now, this how do we stop this? First of all, we stop this by being honest to ourselves and by also being cognizant of what's the aim of this purpose. So I really like what Rebecca mentioned about having a passion and a cause. What drives you? So if you're driven by the fact that you want a position because it's going to pay my rent, I'm going to get close to power, then I'm sorry, then tokenistic forms of opportunities will work for you. But if you're driven by real aspiration of change, and if you're driven by a cause that's close to your heart and it's meaningful to yourself and to society, then you will avoid this type of parading. And another thing is, you do not need, for instance, these type check boxes and box ticking to to become to be a leader. As Isaac mentioned, it's not about positions. It's not about getting into statuses and so on. You yourself are an enabler in whatever space that you operate in, and assessing the environment that you operate in, or the causes that you want to achieve, or your goals and ambitions, is enough of a story for you to actually pursue. So first of all, my advice is you stay away from these checkbox exercises. Imagine your own path to leadership. Make sure that this path to leadership is tied to a meaningful cause, and pursue this cause at all costs.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bilal, for that. Critically, young people need to be driven by an authentic passion and be able to pursue these opportunities with the right motives, and ensure that over and above personal interests, they're able to get into meaningful processes of engagement. Quickly, Rebecca, do you want to just come in and comment on that? And then I'll allow one or two people in the Zoom meeting to come in.
Okay, so just a quick one, just to re-emphasize on what Bilal has just said. Passion is everything that drives us. But above all, in order for us to just get to where we have to be, we need to walk the talk. So first of all, we need to start now engaging. We need to get to podiums where we could have an opportunity to participate in governance. I believe most of the young people have the ability to do so. So if we have to vote, then we have to vote. If we have to make up engagements, if we have to draw up the drawing board, we need to do that. The point is that we don't need to talk and forget. We need to talk and do it. So there must be a lot of engagement from henceforth. We shouldn't just have talks and not engage. So we should implement whatever we are saying. Most of the things have failed in Zambia, in Africa, even in the world, for young people, because we just talk and we don't implement. So I believe there's need for us to implement. Even government has failed us because most of the things have failed to implement. So there must be a lot of implementation in every arena of our lives. If we say today, I want to be a pastor, you must implement and invest. If you want to be an activist, you must implement. So there must be a lot of implementation in the area of young people. Let's not just talk, but let's walk the talk. That's it.
Love the way you put it. More than the talk, invest and implement. That is critical for young people to understand, that for everything that must become reality, there is action that needs to accompany it to ensure that it becomes that reality that we desire. Those of you that are joining us on Facebook Live, you are welcome to put your comments in the comment box. Let us know your opinions and your thoughts. And remember, the conversation doesn't end when this live stream ends. The platform, the Yasha platform, remains open at any time for you to be able to make your submissions, make your input, and share your ideas. Let your voice be heard on this platform. We have a few people that are joining us on the Zoom platform, and I would like, as we begin to wrap up the conversation, to just allow one or two who would like to just bring in a comment, a question, or a submission. If you're on Zoom right now, joining us via Zoom, and you want to quickly make an intervention, I'll invite you to just quickly unmute your mic, introduce yourself, and just make your comment or pose a question very quickly, and then we'll begin to wrap up the conversation.
Hi, I had a quick question. My name is Chennai.
Hi, Chennai. Welcome, and please go ahead.
Yeah, I think thanks so much for all of the really, really interesting inputs. I loved hearing, I think, your stories and what drives you, particularly, you know, what exactly feeds your passions. I just had a question around, I think, you know, and this speaks to, I think, most African countries, the issues of our poverty rates and our inequality, I think, are no secret to anyone. And so most young people, I think, right now are really just trying to put food on the table, right? What then would you tell a young person who is keen, I think, to potentially pursue their passion, but also has, you know, some of these day-to-day realities that they're confronting. Because I think now, you know, a lot of people are being sort of told that, you know, you can't put food, passion can't put food on the table, right?
Right.
So just what kind of advice would you give that person?
Thank you so much, Enlight. That's a very interesting question and perspective that you bring. Passion cannot put food on the table. And of course, young people must balance between making ends meet and pursuing their passion. And I agree that that is quite a struggle for a lot of young people. Within a minute, I'll just allow one of the panelists to respond to that. So any of the three of our panelists, if you want to just take that question very quickly, posed by Chennai.
Okay.
I can give it a go.
Please go ahead. I'm going to leave this to you.
So in terms of the realities that we live in, I agree with Chennai. Like, the days are really tough, and even as we at times would expect young people to volunteer, there would be need to provide some level of support. Personally, in terms of the interns that we take on board, we always make sure that at least by the end of the month, we provide them with some resource that can facilitate their movement, that can help them to ensure that they're not distracted from the work that we are giving them. But in looking at even the first internship that I did with Restless Development, though it was called a voluntary role, we were still given some amount of resources that actually helped to sustain some of our the work that we're doing. And in looking at that, I would look at it in two ways. One, there are certain things that are within your control, even as you're looking for job opportunities. There are also certain structural constraints that are outside your control. Like, some of those might include the role that we would expect from government as it distributes its resources, as it creates opportunities. So if those opportunities are not coming your way for you to trade with your labor, my strong encouragement would always be to try and look for opportunities that are within your community, those that do not strain you that much that you need to look for resources to get on a bus to go to work. In some of the communities that we live in, you would find that there are also community schools that need people that can teach young people how to read and write. And if you can spare even an hour of your time to walk to such a school, provide such a service, in many cases, you might even find therein might be an opportunity that gets you into something that earns you an income, because someone might even be impressed that you volunteered your time, and looking at the skills that you have, and out of maybe a feeling of guiltiness, they might even offer to provide you some resources. Of course, situations might vary, but I would always encourage young people to look for opportunities where they can use their skills for the improvement of the society they live in.
Well put,
sorry.
Isaac. Thank you so much.
I had a quick comment.
Yes.
Please go ahead. Under 30 seconds.
Okay. Do I go first, Bilal, or do you?
Okay. So quickly,
Yeah, you can go.
Of course, there's practical considerations when this comes. There's no doubt about this. I mean, but this was never a hindrance to many other people. I mean, the difference is that a leader will know that there is, of course, practical considerations, and that they need to put food on the table. There's no doubt about it. But within your limitations, within your own context, you'll know. Sometimes leadership does not mean you need to be, as we already said, a member of the ward or a member of parliament or so on, something like that. Sometimes it just means to be someone that looks after their own home or the street, or something that brings positivity to that small environment of theirs, but with an ambition of something big in the future, and slowly putting those steps to achieve that big goal. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to leave everything out of my hand. I'm a political analyst as my full-time job, but outside of that, I have the luxury of speaking to you in platforms, respectable platforms such as these, and others to advocate for a particular cause I believe in. So with whatever means that you actually have, make the most out of that. I think that's my only advice.
Okay, so looks like Bilal is always stealing my mind. So I was gonna say that I was gonna say the poorest person is one person that just depends on their salary. So if you're gonna stay poor, depend on your salary. So I also believe in a notion of having multiple sources of income. So even the people that are working now, the young people, they don't know how to invest and to find other means in which they could provide for their homes. So it's important to always invest, and then also not just to stay in one position. You just can't rely on a white collar job. Do what you can do within yourself. I believe everyone has a gift. Everyone has the ability to do beyond what they're doing. So we don't have to be home and just wait for that white collar job, because it's not coming, not anytime soon. Imagine how many people are getting off university every year. So we have a lot of people, and the government or the system, or I would call it the society, is not ready enough for all of us. So what we need to do is to look for other multiple sources of income, because you need to eat at the end of the day. So you want to stay poor, continue waiting for the white job collar. But if you want to make sure you are stable enough, if you want to make sure you provide something on the table, you need to look for multiple sources of income. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you so much, Bilal. Thank you so much, Isaac. All three of you have brought a very rich perspective to the question that was raised by Chennai. And I think it does help answer some of the questions that were raised. I did promise that I'll take 2 comments from the Zoom meeting. So I'm going to just allow one more comment very quickly. Is there one more person that would like to make a comment in the Zoom meeting, and then we can begin to wrap up? Please just kindly unmute your mic and make your comment or submission. All right, otherwise, if not, I will then begin to wrap up. And I must say that despite all the technological challenges, this has been a very insightful conversation. Our panel really brought rich discussions on the table in as far as inspiring young people and challenging young people to lead at various levels in their communities is concerned. And I want to just quickly then allow all three of our panelists to be able to wrap up and make their conclusion. At Yasha, we believe that young people should lead, inspire, and thrive. And the whole purpose of these discussions is to ignite that fire in young people to be able to become the agents of change and leaders that drive development at whatever level they're at in their life right now. So I want to invite our panel very quickly in closing. Speak to the young people in Zambia, across the world, using your story as an inspiration. What can they do? Having heard all that they've heard today, what can they do to yasha their leadership and be able to lead, inspire, and thrive, just like you all have done? Very quickly, I want to start with Rebecca, and then I'll go to Isaac and close with Bilal in that order. Over to you, Rebecca.
Okay, so my final words are, if you're out there and you feel you need to just do something extraordinary, it takes you, because you're the best manpower that you have. So I always tell people, you are the human resource. So you have you yourself. Before you have the money, you have you. So if you want to see the change, you must take up the change yourself. Leaders don't wait. Leaders go ahead of everybody else. So if you want to take up that chance, you must be ready to invest your human resource, which is you. Time is everything. Thank you.
Well, to all the young people that found the time to listen to our conversation, which we consider as an investment of their time, I would like to encourage you to take the first step in line with your ambitions. And this narrative that young people are the future leaders does not actually work. The future that they keep talking about is now. If you look at a country like Zambia, it is actually grappling with a number of challenges, and those challenges will not be resolved or solved by those that are holding titles or positions. It will actually take yourself and myself putting our ideas together, our efforts together, to begin to transform our country, our continent into the kind of environment that would all be very happy for our children to grow up in. So let's take up the responsibility and sacrifice for our country.
Thank you so much, Isaac. Well said. And I like the fact that you remind young people that leadership is not really about position. It is about driving change. You don't need a position to be influential. You don't need a title to effect change in the various spaces that you're in. So for any young person listening, don't wait for a title. Don't wait for a position. Begin to lead change wherever you are. Bilal, over to you with your rapid remarks.
Thank you. Again, I'm no position to give out advice to people that may be much more knowledgeable than me and know about what we're talking about here in much more detail than I can say. But from my very little and my very basic experience, I would like to say that the world is changing and the world is becoming even more and more difficult and difficult to navigate. And the youth deserve and should have the opportunity to represent their own interests and no one else. Be the change that you want to be, that you want to see in your society, and make it happen. And I place lots of emphasis on agency because this is all that we possess in our hands. We can make together, if we put in this little efforts together, I think this can be a combined success for everyone.
Thank you so much, Bilal. And there you have it, young people, ladies and gentlemen. This has been the Yasha Enlight Table Talk. I want to take the opportunity to thank our panel for joining us and bringing such great insight into this conversation. Thanks to Rebecca. Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Bilal, for joining us and being able to share your own stories, but bringing your experiences and insights in such an enriching dialogue to inspire young people and encourage young people to become the change that they want. Now, for every person that has been joining this discussion, what remains for you to do is take all the wisdom and information that has been shared tonight and make it practical in your life and in your community. Remember, the conversations continue on the Yasha platform. Feel free to make your submissions, make your comments, and join us again next week, Tuesday, at the same time, when we bring yet another panel of discussants to be able to build up from where we've left this conversation. For now, this has been Benjamin Mwape, your host, and thank you so much to everybody for joining us. We will speak to you again next week at the same time. Remain Yashat. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.